Canada is doing that thing it does right before everybody starts to argue about defense spending, and that is buying new stuff. And not just the normal, we'll get to it someday stuff, we're talking about speeding up plans for new armored vehicles and quietly starting to set the table for what replaces Canada's Leopard 2 main battle tanks. This is a pretty logical response for a problem that Canada just cannot ignore anymore. The Arctic is getting more important, and it is also getting more crowded. So let's talk about what just changed, what Canada's military actually looks like right now, what's genuinely solid, what's not, and why buy new armor is only one slice of this. In late January 2026, Canadian defense officials at the Defense IQ's International Armored Vehicles Conference in England said that Canada wants to speed up the purchase of at least 250 new armored fighting vehicles. And they also said that they're working through plans to modernize its current Leopard 2A6 tanks while starting the process of picking a new future tank. This was first reported by Shepherd Media, and then our friends at the Warzone dug in as well. This comes as Canada grapples with changing geopolitical and environmental realities. Among one of their big needs is an upgraded fleet of armor, so this change is coming in two steps. Step one is getting more armored vehicles sooner because they need them. The Warzone report says that Canada is aiming to field these new vehicles between 2029 and 2031. That is pulling left from earlier timelines that put it at about the mid-2030s. The context here is Canada trying to stand up new medium cavalry units and build a more capable land force, both for NATO commitments and for the reality that you can't drive a wheeled armored vehicle everywhere in the Canadian North. Step 2 is the tank question. Shepherd reports that Canada is improving its Leopard fleet, but before that's even fully done, they're also looking at buying a new tank. They could potentially identify and begin the procurement of this new tank by around 2030, while still continuing its Leopard upgrades into the 2030s. Those are big moves for Canada's armed forces because they signal urgency. They also signal that Canada isn't convinced that just keep the old stuff going is good enough anymore, and this is why. Canada's 2024 defense policy update titled Our North Strong and Free pretty much spells out the underlying logic. Canada says the security environment is getting worse, that the Arctic matters more, and that it needs a military that can defend Canada at home, contribute to North American defense, and still show up for allies when the call comes. In that document, the government also projects its defense spending to GDP ratio rising to 1.76% by 2029 and 2030, and says it's laying the groundwork to keep moving toward NATO's 2% guideline over time. The Arctic is forcing some of these moves, and here's why. The Arctic isn't just a bunch of polar bears and penguins like some Disney movie, mostly because penguins don't live in the Arctic, and polar bears are ruthless apex predators that rip their prey apart until they're a blood-covered mess. Instead, it is a set of approaches into North America, a massive coastline, and a region where Russia operates routinely, and where China has been trying to increase its presence and influence. We got into the Arctic in the video on Greenland, which you may have already seen, and if you haven't, go ahead and check that out next. We'll link it in the end of the video, and I'll throw up a card right here so that you can find it easily. Now, even if you ignore every single argument about resources or shipping, the defense problem remains. The high north is a route to North America. If you want early warning and credible deterrence, you need sensors, aircraft, ships, and the infrastructure to operate them, and the military to protect them on the ground. To drive home just how important the Arctic is becoming, let's talk about NORAD a bit. NORAD is the North American Aerospace Defense Command. It's the US-Canada command that's responsible for aerospace warning and control for North America. For decades, one of the big issues in Arctic defense has been that the geography is massive and the distances are enormous. That's why Canada has put real money into NORAD modernization. In 2022, Canada announced a $38.6 billion plan over 20 years to modernize NORAD capabilities. The idea is simple: get better sensors, better command and control, better infrastructure, and better ways to detect threats earlier. A key piece of that is Arctic over-the-horizon radar. Over-the-horizon radar is not magic, even though it might sound like it. The basic concept is that instead of relying only on line-of-sight radar, which gets limited by the curve of the Earth because the Earth is not flat, you use the upper atmosphere to help extend detection ranges. The details get technical fast, but the point is early warning. All of this is to say that our northern neighbor, with about 40% of its landmass considered to be Arctic, is starting to take defense a little more seriously. And that's a good thing because their military could use it. If you ask what armor Canada has today, the honest answer is it has a little bit of a lot, and it's modern in some places and decades behind in others. The best Canada-specific strength is that the Army has long experience running a wheeled armored force. Canada's LAV-6 fleet is the workhorse because LAVs are badass. It's modern compared to the older generations of light armor, it's relative in NATO environments, and it's something the Canadian Army knows how to operate and sustain. Starting in 2011, Canada began upgrading 550 of their original LAV-3s to the LAV-6. These upgrades included adding the double V hull to protect against IEDs and mines, adding a 450 horsepower engine along with transmission and suspension upgrades, better fire control and other systems, and better overall armor. By 2019, all 550 of them had been delivered by General Dynamics Land Systems. Right now, Canada operates 5 variants of the LAV-6. The Infantry Section Carrier, ISC, Command Post, CP, Engineer, Reconnaissance, and Observation Post, or OP. Like their American counterparts, the LAV-6's big weapon is the M242 Bushmaster 25mm chain gun, and that is found on the ISC. The rest of them are meant for command and control, meaning they carry a lot of comms gear, combat engineering and breaching, sneaking around finding stuff, and watching the enemy. I could talk all day about the LAV because I genuinely do love the LAV. The first unit I was in the Marine Corps was light armored reconnaissance, and we had LAVs, but I won't. But maybe in a follow-up video as a treat to myself I will, but right now, let's move on. The Canucks also have the LAV-6 Armored Combat Support Vehicles meant to replace their Mike 113 tracked light armored vehicles. This program is ongoing with 360 total on order, but 8 variants are listed. The troop cargo vehicle to carry troops and supplies, the ambulance, command post with comms gear, electronic warfare, engineer, fitter cargo for maintenance and general hauling, the maintenance and recovery, and the mobile repair team. The next big chunk of their armor comes in the form of 500 Textron Tactical Armored Patrol Vehicles, or TAPVs. I can't tell you how many times it took me to say that, but it was a lot. The heaviest weapon those have is a 40mm grenade launcher, so they're not really the beefiest boys out there. LAVs and TAPVs make up the bulk of their armored vehicles, but there's a smattering of others like Cougars, Huskies, and even G-Wagons, but those are in relatively small numbers. Now for the tanks. Canada has a fleet of 74 Leopard 2A4 and 2A6 variants. The Leopard comes equipped with a 120mm main gun, with the 2A6 sporting an upgraded version of it. It's just longer and it's known as the L55 gun, and overall the Leopard is a widely respected main battle tank that has seen success on battlefields from Afghanistan, Iraq in the hands of the Turks, and most recently Ukraine. Tanks are still tanks. They are hard to replace, they're expensive to run, but they are incredibly useful when you need protected firepower and mobility on battlefields where drones and missiles exist. Canada is currently upgrading its 2A6 variants to the 2A6M variant, where they get upgraded belly armor and turret protection. There are also ongoing changes in the heavy direct fire modernization program that mostly focuses on optics and fire control, or how the gunner sees and hits targets. The Canadian defense officials who spoke didn't only speak about upgrading the Leopards, they also mentioned replacing them with another main battle tank, saying they plan to identify and begin procurement of a new one by 2030. Like the US Army's XM-30 Bradley replacement program, they envision these new tanks, whatever they may be, working alongside the Leopards for some time. Overall, Canada's army is very strong in wheeled armor, but the Arctic is not a wheeled vehicle paradise. There are places you can use wheeled vehicles in the north, and there are plenty of missions where wheels are exactly what you want, but if you're thinking about mobility in snow, rough ground, and miserable terrain like mud, especially with heavy loads, tracks matter. This is part of why Canada is pushing for 250 new armored fighting vehicles with tracks. This is to give them the ability to move a protective force in places where the environment itself is trying to kill you just as much as the enemy. Leaders had already planned to buy new tracked AFVs, but the timeline took that into the mid-2030s. Now they want them to start showing up in 2029. What these are is anybody's guess at this point, but they'll be utilized by the new medium cavalry units. They did lay out some requirements like being able to withstand 30mm cannon fire and 155mm artillery blasts at 10 meters. This is to meet what is called the Standardization Agreement 6 or STANAG 6. It's basically just a NATO standard. Some contenders could be the Lynx, which we've talked about in the XM30 video, the CV90, which we also have a video on why the US doesn't buy that, or the Hanwha Redback. These are all vehicles in service or already being produced, so buying 250 won't require spinning up huge production lines. They'll just have to get in line behind other countries that are buying them. So Canada is making some big moves to beef up its armor, but it won't be as easy as just buying some new stuff. Canada's defense problem is not just buy new things. It's also who crews them, who maintains them, and how quickly can you train and retain these people. Canada's own information on recruitment and retention shows a significant gap between authorized strength and actual strength. As of March 31st, 2025, they put the regular force at roughly 65,700 against a target of 71,500, and the primary reserve was roughly at 23,450 against a target of 30,000. In October 2025, the Auditor General released a report on recruiting that laid out problems in the recruiting and training system, basically saying the Canadian Armed Forces has not met recruitment and training needs, and that bottlenecks and delays contribute to operational gaps. This matters because procurement timelines can look great on a slide, but personnel shortfalls can erase that advantage. As we have experienced here in the United States and other countries have experienced, recruiting for the military can be hard, and there really isn't an easy solution. If Canada can't figure out how to fill the ranks, it'll have a lot of empty tanks and other vehicles, but I mostly just wanted to rhyme there. The good news is that recruitment can turn much quicker than armored vehicle production, so by the time they start taking delivery of all these new vehicles, they may have troops waiting for them. Canada's arming up story isn't about some Canadian turn toward militarism. It's mostly about geography and reality finally collecting its debt. Canada sits next to the world's most powerful military, the United States, obviously, and for a long time it could rely on that relationship while keeping its own force smaller and more specialized. But as the Arctic becomes more contested and as long-range threats, submarines, and great power competition becomes more present, the minimum credible capability goes up. That's why you're seeing Canada move so quickly after a long time of not doing a whole lot. That isn't to say that Canada has not contributed. They were right there alongside us in Afghanistan, and they lost over 100 troops there, so they've been there the whole time. They just haven't been as loud as we have. The good news is, this direction makes sense. The bad news is, the hard part isn't just picking vehicles. The hard part is getting it fielded on time, crewing it, sustaining it, and building the infrastructure to operate in the Arctic without the environment doing more damage than the enemy. What I'm watching next is whether Canada turns all this conference talk into actual hardware. First, the tracked vehicle program. If Canada really wants those new tracked AFVs between 2029 and 2031, we should see the requirements firm up fast, what variants they want, what high protection means in practice, and whether Canada buys something close to off the shelf or starts customizing it into a science project like the US did with the XM30 program. Second, the sustainment contract keeps the Leopards viable into the mid-2030s, but the real tell will be whether identify and begin procurement by 2030 turns into a real selection process, because things change, regimes change, and people get new pet projects. And finally, the least sexy part, people. Canada's own numbers show that it's well short of its targets, and the Auditor General has been blunt about recruiting and training bottlenecks. If Canada can't staff the force, it can buy the nicest gear on earth and still end up with a very expensive parking lot. But overall, all of this seems well thought out, and Canada is well on the path of beefing up its military at a time when it really needs to. So let us know what you think in the comments. Alright, now it's channel update time. I wrote the script and Savvy edited the video, and I don't really have a whole lot. I'll give out my email again. It's kyle.gunn@taskandpurpose.com. You can email me with criticisms, feedback, suggestions. If you just need somebody to talk to, it can be civilian, military, veteran. I'll be there. I get a lot of them and I prioritize them by, like, if it's a correction and I need to respond, or if it's someone that just needs to talk to somebody, they get the first priority. I love getting the emails, and I get a lot of like, hey, we love what you guys are doing, and I really appreciate that, and I'm going to respond to everyone. But I'm pretty far behind. I think the most, I'm like, what is today, the 30th that I'm recording this? I'm about 30 days behind for most of them. So if you're one of those that sent it between January 1st and today, I'm sorry, I'll get to it. Other than that, not a whole lot going on. Store.taskandpurpose.com. You can buy this and a bunch of other stuff. Code ActuallyWatch for 10% off. I am Kyle, your friendly ginger producer man. You are all dismissed, and thank you so much for being here. I will see you next time.